morning, everyone. Tavi Ginari here from eliguitarist.com, and it is a great pleasure to have today in the studio David Collett, the president of Guitar Salon International. The Guitar Salon International is the world's foremost store for classical guitars, flamenco guitars, and the Guitar Salon International has been a tremendous asset and friend to the Elite Guitarist platform. And I have enjoyed interacting with David and with the guys at GSI for over 10 years now, and it's been just a really wonderful collaboration. I want this to be an educational event, and I know of nobody else who matches the knowledge and the skill of David, who's the president of the Guitar Salon International.
Thank you.
Do you feel like you heard this already?
Well, I don't mind saying everything twice, yeah.
All right, so I want this to be an educational event. Also, we want to help out. So we're going to give away 5 packages of all kinds of guitar swag. Several albums, Eva Beneke, Mark Teicholz, Valsiana, an album recorded at the Guitar Salon International, strings provided by RC and Knobloch, as well as a glass nail file. I'll throw in my own album. So if you want to be entered into this drawing, we're going to give away 5 of these packages. Go to the website, eliguitarist.com, and below the live stream segments, you'll be able to see an email field there. Just enter your email address, and then we're going to announce the winners after this live stream. Okay, so an educational event on classical guitar. I asked David just kind of a first question. What is a brief historical survey of the classical guitar? When did it start? And then can you give us just a brief description of the 5 most important guitar builders?
You want both questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Take it away.
A brief, quick survey of the history of the guitar, and I'd like to say it started centuries ago, or maybe even millennia ago. If you go to the Louvre in Paris, for example, I was there a few years ago, and I noticed that they had stringed instruments in the ancient Egypt section. And these instruments looked like something I could probably have played, So they weren't guitars, but they were sort of plucked instruments that were guitar-like. And so throughout the ages, people have been plucking guitars, of course. It's as we all know, it's a very addictive hobby and a kind of a joy and a thrill. And so people have been doing it for a long time, and guitar-like objects have been making their way through the centuries. And but it's not until about 1850 that we hit kind of a major episode in the middle of the 19th century, and it happens in southern Spain in Almeria, in the workshop of a guy named Antonio de Torres. He was actually in Seville early on, but he's from Almeria, and he worked later in Almeria. And there is where kind of the guitar as we know it today came together in its finished form. He basically came up with the proportions and the dimensions and the bracing patterns and everything that is still in use today. And it's been awfully hard to improve on it. And in fact, it's arguable it really hasn't been improved on. It's been modified a little bit, and there's been some variety that's come out since his time, but it hasn't really been improved. And so your next question, the 5 most influential or important historical builders. Well, obviously Torres, he made the biggest impact.
Right. His
crater is the largest, as we would say. And then after him, several guitar makers were kind of tweaking with the Torres design, trying to find a way to kind of nuance it in a slightly different way. And the first really to do that successfully was Herman Hauser in the 1920s. When he first, or in the 19-teens, when he first saw a Torres, it really blew his mind, and it kind of changed, it rocked his world pretty hard, because he'd been building these kind of Germanic style instruments before, and a popular style was the Viennese style, like Stauffer, that was really popular in Munich at the time. So what he did is he kind of integrated the Torres design. He built Torres guitars, but kind of used some of this background knowledge that he already knew about. He came up with a kind of a new style, and that became a flavor of guitar. It's kind of a slight, it's like a different flavor of ice cream,
right, Right.
That has been a very copied style of guitar ever since. In fact, the Hauser family are still building those same kinds of guitars today.
Would you say that Hauser, it's easier to replicate than a Torres?
I don't know. I think they're both challenging. They're both mysteries. They're both riddles. There are guitar makers who specialize in Torres. There's guitar makers who specialize in Hauser. And so it sort of depends on where your heart is as a guitar maker, what your loyalty is. And so I think that building guitars is very, very hard. It's like playing a guitar is also very hard. Yeah.
And to replicate sound, there's so many unknowns in the process.
Very hard to do. Yeah. Very hard to do. And you can build a guitar based on the thicknesses and the proportions and the dimensions, and it's not going to come out sounding the same. Because there's all these millions of little tiny details that you can't measure. When a guitar maker is building a guitar, he's nuancing things. He's filing a little here. He's sanding there. He's testing the stiffness. He's kind of nuancing, and then when he's done with it, that's the guitar takes on his character.
That's right.
And that's something that you can't copy. There's no recipe for that. Yeah. So it's very, very hard to do. So there's Torres, there's Herman Hauser. After that, I think another guy who did a kind of a very interesting tweak on the Torres design was Robert Bouche in Paris. He came up with this clever little design, this little brace that runs across the entire lower bout right under the bridge, kind of like a seesaw for the bridge to kind of teeter-totter on. That allowed him to thin the top a little bit, reduce the number of braces from 7 to 5, because he had this structure in there that was really holding the top up beautifully, but it really allowed for this really flexible. And so there's a lot of color possibilities and I'd say dynamic range possibilities that were kind of enhanced suddenly with this design. And these three makers, I think, are really the three critical ones in the development and the design of the guitar. Jeffrey Elliott up in Portland a few years ago during a visit, when I was visiting him, told me that as a modern guitar maker, if you're familiar with Torres, Hauser I, and Bouche, then you have all of the tools in your toolkit necessary to build a proper guitar today as a modern guitar maker. So, but after that, there were a few other things that happened, I would say. Jose Ramirez III popularized the cedar top. And I think it was around 1964.
You mean he didn't invent it?
He didn't invent it. He did not invent it, no. The earliest
cedar...
Did he
say he did?
He did say he did, yeah. If you read his book, he claims authorship. But it's become known in the last few years that there was an Italian guitar maker named Pietro Gallinati who built one in 1951. And Illyrio Diaz, and this guitar made in 1951 even won a guitar making competition in Turin in 1951. And Illyrio Diaz gave the concert on it and everything. And Illyrio Diaz was so taken with this instrument that he toured on it for several years. And so my hunch, is that sometime in the early to mid 1950s, he would have been performing in Madrid, and Jose Ramirez would have known this guitar and seen it and thought, that's a great idea. Why don't I run with it? And so Gallinati, I think, only made, I've heard about 8 or 9 cedar tops. So when I say Jose Ramirez popularized it, what I mean is that Ramirez took on cedar making in the mid 60s and still to this day do it, to the degree that so many top concert players have played on cedar top Ramirez's, including Segovia, Perkening, the Romeros, name it. I mean, virtually all the big names have played on these, and even David Russell recorded an album.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he recorded early on. He played with Jose Ramirez. So, so much so that people today almost think that cedar is the traditional wood that guitars have always been made out of. But the world is now producing probably 50-50 spruce and cedar. But Jose Ramirez really made a big impact because he pushed cedar like crazy, really knew how to do it and make it great. And he also, at the same time, redesigned some structural elements of the box of the guitar. So, for example, he made it a little bit bigger. He doubled the sides, which was a pretty important development at this time, because players were starting to play in places like Carnegie Hall and big halls, and Segovia was looking for an instrument that could push sound out to an audience a little bit more successfully. So by doubling the sides, like Ramirez was doing, you're creating a very hard structure,
stiff,
like almost like a snare drum, like the frame of that. And you don't lose any vibration to the sides. It's all it forces it all onto the top, which pushes it out to the audience. And creates, so you get a little bit more power, a little more volume and projection. And so that was a development. So I think Jose Ramirez III was a very important maker in the history of this, that brings us up today. And that we're at 4 now, right?
Yeah, 4, one more.
4, one more.
High five.
I would say Jose Romanios. Not so much for... he didn't really add any new developments to the design of the guitar, but what he did is he created a renaissance of right at this time when everybody was smitten with these big, heavy, double-sided cedar top guitars. He was the guy that came back out and reminded the world, wait a minute, there's another kind of guitar. Let's go back to the roots and the origins, and what's a Torres and what's a Hauser I. And many of today's top guitar makers claim that without Romanios, they would be lost. He taught many top guitar makers. He did master classes for years and years and years on how to go back to the roots and build a Torres and a Hauser style guitar. And he wrote the book, which is it's sort of the Bible to guitar makers today.
Classic, yeah.
And so he really made a giant impact and reminded the world of the roots of the guitar and how to make those great. And that's created a huge number of just fantastic guitar makers who build now in that older style. So you have the developments through Ramirez, and then you have Romanios reminding everybody of what a traditional guitar is and how to make that great.
Right.
And so I think these are probably the 5 biggest contributors in the history to the sort of the current scene of guitar making.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man, if we only had some of these guitars to play, right? Well, it so happens that by virtue of what GSI is and the access they have to these guitars, we actually have close to $1 million worth of guitars
right here,
right there on that cheap little guitar stand. I really hope that guitar stand actually
holds them and supports them. I know.
I think I paid like $12 for the guitar stand. So
yeah.
I want to play a little bit and just give you an idea of the sound of these guitars. So nothing is altered. We're just using environment microphones here. And I'm going to try to play the same passage. Should we start with the earliest one?
Sure, the earliest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get this.
Should I introduce it?
Please.
This guitar was built in 1883 for Francisco Tarrega. It was built for him by Antonio de Torres, who is, we call him the father of the modern guitar. And Tarrega had 3 Torres guitars, and this was the second one. And it's made with maple back and sides, plain maple back and sides, of course spruce top. It's got some beautiful inlay and decoration, and curiously it has these little inlays here, these mother of pearl fish, which are very charming. And this is basically the birthplace of the guitar. This was in the nursery, in the historical origins of the guitar. This is one of the first births that took place of the instrument that we now love and cherish today.
Wow.
So
this is an incredible treat. Folks, these guitars are so rare. It's not just that they are rare to see and look, but to hear them live side by side. And so so I'm going to try to play the same passage on all of these instruments so that you have an idea of what these guitars sound like. We could try to describe the sound, but I think it's better for you to trust your ears and just go with that and decide what you like. You probably like them all. So. flamenco.
Yeah,
I can't believe I played the wrong note on it. Out
You
of
were
all
so
the
busy
guitars,
appreciating the beauty of
so
the sound.
distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's just the beauty of the guitar.
There's a poetry and a lyricism. And this was all new at this time. This did not exist in the guitars of Torres' day that were already being built.
I mean, even by modern standards, this guitar is as powerful and projects beautifully. It doesn't feel like an old, incipient, primitive
It's a modern
instrument.
guitar, just built 150 years ago. Pepe Romero has a funny story about he toured for years playing the Aranjuez, you know, and he would always, whenever he was playing in Madrid, Rodrigo, when he was alive, would always be in the audience.
Really?
And there was one concert he gave, and he said Rodrigo would always come backstage every time he would play and say, "Oh, Pepe, I love the way you play, and thank you for playing my piece." And it was all this stuff about Pepe.
Mm-hmm.
There was one time when Rodrigo came back and didn't say any of that. Instead, he told Pepe, he said, "What was the guitar? It was beautiful. It was loud. It was so expressive. What was it?" And that was the time Pepe was touring on his first epoch, Torres.
Wow.
This little Torres guitar. And so even in an audience with an orchestra, the guitar really just made a big impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. David, would you come closer in the shot a
Yes.
little bit? What's the next one, David?
I'd say let's why not the Hauser I.
Okay, Hauser one.
We can go chronologically here.
Okay, can you introduce this guitar?
1928, Herman Hauser I. This is sort of a Yobet model, which means it's based on a Torres that was owned by Miguel Yobet, FE09, which is now in a museum in Barcelona. And it's a slightly smaller body. And the reason these are so exciting to so many people is because when you pick up the guitar and you feel the slightly smaller size, your brain automatically expects a smaller sound or limits that you don't have with a bigger guitar. And then of course when you play it, that's all broken, you know, because the guitar delivers everything.
Right.
And so your mind has this kind of exciting experience of the expectation and then what actually happens. There's a gap there, and that sort of gap, it's almost like falling and your stomach goes a little bit.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you just have this expectation of what the guitar is going to do, and then it does something bigger than that, and it's very exciting. So this is a very popular, still to this day, a lot of people build Yobet models. And Hauser I was doing it back in 1928.
All right, let's see. These guitars are so sensitive to tuning. It's really difficult to get a good. I mean, they just respond so quickly to the smallest variation. But all right, here we go.
You're so busy listening to the sound that you forget what you're doing. Yeah.
No, it's not that. I'm trying to see how long will it last.
Right.
Like this. It just keeps on going. It just goes and goes. I just wanted to see what can it do really. I mean, this is a phenomenal guitar. Many times I think when people talk about German guitars, would you come closer? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I know I'm making you uncomfortable, right?
Well, I don't want to bump the guitar. And
people think of this Teutonic sound as being kind of heartless, just kind of clinical, clean, but this is so soulful.
It is. I mean, to me, what the Teutonic sound is, and this has it in it, is clarity, kind of a precision to every note, and a little bit like what the piano does, in the sense that you kind of have this kind of, I wouldn't say hardness to the note, but kind of the percussiveness of it is, what it really does is it helps define the note, so that you have this kind of, and I guess the word would be clarity. That's what I hear in the Teutonic style. I hear this kind of firmness to the fundamental pitch of the note.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When you hear a Torres or a Spanish guitar, they're loose and they're wide, and there's a lot of harmonic content floating around. And with this, the harmonics are very controlled, and so you have a lot of fundamental, very controlled overtones. And when you're hearing those harmonics and you're hearing the sustain, I think what you're hearing is that you're hearing those very controlled overtones contributing to the fundamental, and that's what's giving the guitar that sustain. It's so focused.
Yeah, that's exactly what I hear too. It's not as if there's this blooming overtone that takes over the original sound of the note plucked, but it's just the overtones comes in just at the right time to push the note a little bit further. But the fundamental of the note is just so powerful.
Yep.
No weird frequencies, just gorgeous.
None of this, just clean.
All right, you
Beautiful.
can leave this one here. 1928. Okay.
1928.
What's next, David?
Well, we have two Robert Bouche guitars here. We have the first one he ever built, number one, and that was done in 1946.
I'm smiling because how often do you get access to the first guitar ever built by one of these titans of the
the first one? And this was not only his first guitar, but it was his personal guitar that he owned for his whole life. In fact, when he died, this was still in his possession, and so this was his personal guitar. And the story is that in 1945, when the war ended, his guitar had been he had a Julian Gomez Ramirez guitar. It had been destroyed or stolen or something. He didn't have it anymore. And in post-war Paris in 1945, you couldn't walk down to the local guitar center and buy a guitar. Things were being rebuilt, and they were trying to get the economy going and everything. So he just decided, I'll build one. Why not? And he knew Julian Gomez Ramirez and had hung out in his shop and kind of knew the basics of guitar making. And so he built this guitar for himself, just because he needed a guitar to play. He played in a guitar quartet, and he was a part of a guitar society, so he needed a guitar to play. And his primary occupation, he was a professional painter. Anyway, he was an artist, and that was how he made his living. He didn't have any plans to be a guitar maker. But since he was in these guitar societies, and he would bring his guitar along, everybody would play the guitar and hear it and think, wow, what a guitar. What's this? Can you build one for me? And eventually, in 1947, he finally said, sure, I'll build one. So he built a guitar in 1947, his second guitar, and then he sold it. And that's the other one we have over here. So we have the first guitar that made the big impact. And within a few years, you had players like Alexander Lagoya was playing on Bouche's. And Julian Bream would record on Bouche's later on. So he became a significant force, kind of by accident, because he wasn't planning on being a guitar maker. He kind of fell into it. He just had the natural
necessity.
Yeah.
He needed a guitar.
Yeah. And so he became, in our most important historical guitar makers, he was number 3 on our list. And this is his first guitar that he built for himself.
It's a much larger body, or at least if you... And this one has pegs. So let's see, I hope I can tune it.
The deep
so
bass.
I'm not sure if you're hearing this, but the bass, that is just amazing. You could feel it.
It vibrates the body. Even you're not playing it so loud. It's just, it really comes through.
Yeah, this is...
So this is a guitar where he's really not afraid to let the overtones loose. This is a really loose guitar with a big sound, a big, hefty, thick sound. So anyway, let's play it.
Should we play this?
Beautiful, huh?
You were right about the colors.
Yeah.
The Ponticello is really pronounced. It's got a huge dynamic palette of colors. And so
guitars
sweet.
that do that have that built into the guitar, entice the player to go there and do that.
Sure, because it responds.
Yeah.
And but it's so sweet as well. It's just gorgeous and incredible.
Andrea Taki told me a really charming story of what he thinks a guitar is. You know? And I'd like to share that because you're kind of doing what he said.
Sure.
And that is that he told me once that he thinks a guitar is an emotion box. And I thought, okay, what do you mean by emotion box? And he said, well, think of little kids. They have like their toy box that they put their toys in. And then they carry them around and then they play with their toys in different places. Or an artist who makes paintings. They put all their paints in a box. And then they go to wherever the landscape is that they're going to paint. And they open up the box and they pull out the paints and then they make a painting. And he said a guitar is an emotion box. You put your emotions in there and you carry it around with you. And then when you want to let your emotions out, you play the guitar. And that allows you to let your emotions sort of out into the world and for people to understand and hear.
Yeah.
And it's through sound that you don't talk about your emotions, but you display them through the guitar. The guitar is the box that contains them. And I thought that's a nice little story. And you can hear that when you're playing. When you're playing just now, you were exploring these different you have different emotional responses to hearing the different nuances of sound. And when you have a guitar that can do all of those things, then you can kind of lay it all on the line.
It's just wonderful. And to think of all the stories these guitars could tell. To me, that's something that's really special about these old guitars. Like this guitar made it in that period right after the Second World War, where there was a lot of pain, a lot of angst, the economy was collapsing. And people used this guitar to express their sorrows, their grief. There were people who lost loved ones, and they used this guitar to express those feelings. And people who rejoiced when they had a child, and they probably played this guitar. I mean, to think of being part of that continuum, where as a player, the guitar does not belong to the player in that sense. It's a continuum of belonging to various individuals, and we're just kind of intersecting the life of the guitar and adding some emotion and
a lot of my clients that own these guitars consider themselves sort of the temporary custodians or caregivers. Yeah, that's it. And the guitars, because these guitars outlive all of us. And nobody knows how long guitars will last, but the oldest from Torres are over 150 years old, and they're still going great. I mean, as you can tell.
Wow.
So these guitars could last, for all we know, hundreds of maybe thousands. I don't as long as they're well taken care of, they could last indefinitely, I would say.
Right.
And their journey, as they age, is they take on the personalities of the people who've played them. You remember the Segovia Ramirez, for example. That's an example. Everybody was wondering, why is this guitar so phenomenal for because Ramirez's have a sound. This one had something more than that, and I think you were the first one to come in and record on it.
And can I just take this time to apologize, because when I played that guitar at the GSI concert, I said, when I heard that guitar came, David called me. And actually, no, you called me to tell me you have the guitar, and I was the one begging to play it.
That's right.
Like, David, please let me play it.
We recorded, I think, like 19 videos or something on it, and you were the first one to come in. You were there at the knocking on the door right away. As soon as you knew that guitar was there, you came in.
And I remember after that, I thought, wow, this is a phenomenal guitar. Is there some way I could get it? So I have a friend who has a huge wine collection. I said, David, would you take like $40,000 worth of wine for this guitar? And he said, no way.
Yeah.
It was worth a try.
Yeah. There were a lot of people that really wanted that guitar. But one of the reasons we kind of concluded maybe that it sounded so spectacular was because it was Segovia's main guitar for 11 years. And Segovia played the guitar to death. He played it so much, apparently, that when it went back to Ramirez 11 years later, they had to refinish the back of the neck. We have documentation of that.
Oh, really?
And as you know, the finish on Ramirez is this kind of, it's not even lacquer really, it's a resin finish, which is sort of, they call it the atomic bomb finish, because it'll withstand any explosion. It's really durable and very solid. But if they had to refinish the back of the neck on that guitar after 11 years with Segovia, that means Segovia played that guitar a lot. So the sound of the guitar now, it was probably, when it was built, already a fantastic Ramirez, otherwise Segovia wouldn't have been attracted to it. But Segovia played it enough, and it has his sound in it. The frequencies that he created with his tone and his touch and the way he dug into the guitar is now part of that guitar. And so when you talk about all these old guitars that we have here, they carry the remnants of the people who've played them. That's so part of the sound.
So true. I remember the guitar. The first time I played it, it was a great guitar, right? Phenomenal guitar. But it also needed to be woken up. And the second time I played it, after a few months, after Scott Tennant recorded his Segovia album on the guitar was way better.
Because the guitar was, we got it woken up pretty quick, because a lot of the players that came in to play on it.
Everybody wanted to see it.
Scott wanted to record, Scott Tennant ended up recording an album on it of Segovia's original compositions. So everybody wanted to come in. And so once the guitar was sort of warmed up again, it was something really, really incredible. But it shows you the power of the player. And how that can go in. Because, Segovia had this famous sound. Most people that I talked to who went to see him play said they wanted to go hear his sound. Segovia had a sound. And so when you have a guitar like that, 69 Ramirez, that he played for 11 years, it contains his sound in it. That special thing.
Absolutely.
Should we take a look at the last one?
Sure. Bouche number 2. And this is an interesting guitar because it's sort of the guitar that launched Bouche's career. It was the first one that he sold. And if you go to our website and look this guitar up, you'll see we put some photographs that were taken in the early 1950s of Daniel Friedrich playing the guitar as a young man in his 20s. And he's hanging out with Django Reinhardt's brother, Joseph Reinhardt. So again, you talk about all the people who've played these guitars. This guitar was played, not long after it was built by people like Joseph Reinhardt. And Roland Deans played a concert on it at GSI. All the people that have played this guitar. It's incredible, the history. But anyway, why don't we let you play it here.
Close enough for an old guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Beautiful.
Really beautiful. I could definitely hear the similarities between this and number 1. Of course, they're so close.
Yeah.
The same big boomy low.
That big low body resonance, that depth.
Yeah, I think this one probably has fewer overtones but more clarity. For example, here, you could hear every one of those notes in the chord.
And I noticed you were getting a ponticello sound very easily without even moving your hand that far towards the bridge.
Right, it did not necessitate.
Yeah. Oh, if you do that,
that's
even crazier.
Yeah, it's an amazing palette of colors. Wow.
Very, very delicate. Yeah, very expressive. This just provides players with an enormous amount of opportunity to explore color, nuance, and that's sort of what people want to hear when they hear a guitar.
That's true. It's not the volume. It's not the it's the poetry.
Yeah.
I think it's the expression that's really magical about the guitar as an instrument.
No other instrument does it.
No.
A violin is not as expressive. A piano is not as expressive. I mean, if you start talking about ensembles like orchestras, then you start getting into you've got a lot of possibilities there with tone colors and all this sort of thing. But as a solo instrument, that's the guitar's very unique and special quality, is that it has all of this nuance and color, and you can tell these really interesting stories with it. And it's a vehicle for poetry.
Right.
And like Taki says too, it's any emotion that you are capable of feeling can be expressed on the guitar.
Right.
You can find it, and that's the magic of the guitar. And that's and Segovia famously even said it was like a miniature orchestra for him. You had all of this variety. No other instrument does that. A violin doesn't have all the sounds of an orchestra. You have a couple of different sounds on a violin. Piano's even less. But as a solo instrument, I think that's the magic of the guitar. That is our special thing about this instrument.
No other instrument has it. Yeah. Let's see. I have a few more questions.
Okay,
and,
fire away.
What has been gained and what has been lost in the last, let's say, 50 years of luthiery, of guitar building? And I'm going to move just a little bit.
What has been gained, what's been lost? I think we live in a world where technology is very much a reality in our lives. The iPhone 12 is better than the iPhone 11. The new operating system on your computer that you upgrade to every 2 weeks is better for some reason than the previous one. So we're kind of constantly being reminded that innovation is what pushes things to get better and better and better and better. And I think we tend to think that also about the guitar, and it's not necessarily the case. I think, like what Jeff Elliott said, if you know the work of Torres, Hauser, and Bouche, you kind of have all of the material you need. So, but yet that doesn't stop people from trying to improve the guitar. And so there's been an enormous amount of experimentation, starting in the 1960s, with a guy named Dr. Kasha, who came up with a design. There was an idea to build the perfect guitar and to use technology to do so. So they would take these x-rays of the tops and of the nodal points where the vibrations were being transmitted and all kinds of things. And they could nuance the tops exactly so that you had perfect balance on the guitar and that the sustain was very even. And all of these kind of ideas. And actually, speaking of Jeff Elliott, he was in Richard Schneider's workshop in the early 60s apprenticing.
Wow.
And so Jeff built several of these first Kasha guitars. And he said the first one they built sounded terrible, and it was really a big disappointment. So they thought, well, what did we do wrong? We must have done everything. So they went back to the drawing board. They built another one, also not good. And I think what the lesson was is that you can't build a machine that registers the beautiful sound of a guitar. That has to be done by the artist, by the guitar maker. He has to build that into the guitar. You can't go based on a mathematical formula. Right. And so that project failed, but it did start this kind of quest to scientifically get involved with the guitar. So you've had all kinds of people with engineering backgrounds and trying to build perfect guitars. And I think in the end, Jeff Elliott has a funny story. He says he's tried all the experiments. He's done everything under the sun. He's tried building guitars with super thin tops, with double tops, with portholes in the sides, with all kinds of things. And he says, the reason he doesn't do that in his regular guitar is because if it doesn't improve the guitar, then you drop it and you continually, you try all kinds of new experiments, but he says he's a traditionalist, but not by choice. He says in the end, the best guitars he can build are based on these traditional designs. So I think there's been a lot of experimentation, and it's produced some very interesting results. I think if you look at lattice braced guitars and double top guitars, they have improved sort of the immediate volume that the player feels. So they have this explosion of volume that
feels really powerful.
Behind the guitar, yeah. And but oddly, they don't seem to carry well in halls. So that's a weird
dichotomy there. Like it's loud but projection-wise,
Yeah, there's sort of an epicenter.
it doesn't
and then,
reach the back of
and
the
then
hall.
yeah, it doesn't go back. And some of these guitars, like I remember once I saw Julian Bream play at his very last concert in 2001, I believe, in London in Wigmore Hall. And I remember when he came out, he had his 1940 Hauser with him, and I got my tickets late, so I was like in the back row. I mean, I was bumping my head on the wall, you know. I mean, I was really in the last seat. And I remember when he got up, before he performed, he was making an announcement. I think he was changing the program or describing the piece he was about to play or something. But as he was talking, he was almost yelling, because he was, you know, when you're speaking publicly, you're trying to project your voice as loud as possible. So just short of almost yelling, he was talking to the audience. And I, in the back, I could barely make out what he was saying. And I was thinking to myself, oh no, I mean, I'm not going to, when he starts playing that guitar, this little old 1940 Hauser, I'm not going to hear anything. I mean, if the guy's virtually yelling and I can barely tell what he's saying, and I don't know if I'm going to hear anything. But as soon as he sat down and started to play, I heard everything. I heard nail noise. I heard a couple of little flubs. I heard every little detail and the nuance of sound that he was doing, and it really made a profound impact on me, because this little guitar. And so Liam Romanios was there, and I had a drink with him after the concert, and he'd been sitting much closer. He was like in the third or fourth row. And so I asked him, I said, is that guitar particularly loud? Or because, I mean, I told him my experience of it, just I heard everything in the back. And he said, no, not loud at all. He said, you're probably hearing about 85% of what I'm hearing from the distance. Wow. He said, what those guitars do is they project, they carry. The note leaves the guitar, and it just keeps going. Yeah. And the guitar doesn't feel super loud to you as the player, but it's very, very successful in a concert and a setting. And I was really, really impressed with that. But yeah, a lot of times, yeah, these really powerful modern guitars, you get a big explosion of sound to the player, and they're very exciting to play. But in a hall like that, the guy in the back.
That's right.
That's how I hear them at that same distance. So people are still trying to figure it out. People do want more volume, and that's, I'd say, the last 20, 30 years of guitar making, that's been the quest. How to build a louder guitar that also at the same time projects.
Yeah, that's why lattice, double top instruments.
Yeah. That's why they're so popular right now.
Daman, Wagner.
Yeah. There's a whole history of that. And so it, in my opinion, it hasn't really been fully worked out yet. But they're trying. They're trying real hard.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd say that's in the last 50 years. That's sort of what's been going on. It's been a little bit the age of experimentation, but in the end, I think when you play guitar like this, you're sort of going, wow, what more do you need?
It's just ennobling. Maybe I'll just make a couple of remarks, because I know GSI sells all kinds of guitars, but these are just private, personal remarks. When I help students pick guitars, I always tell them, don't try to imagine yourself with this guitar in 3 months, because the volume wears out. Not that the guitar gets softer, but the impact of a loud guitar kind of loses its effect.
You get used to it.
Yeah, it's just kind of like riding a motorcycle, it's really exciting for the first, 3 months, but then you kind of want to get into a car. When it starts raining, you just want a car. Guitars are like that. And I like guitars that speak, that are poetic, that have a lot of tonal colors, even though volume-wise, they don't feel as powerful. Because in the long run, that's just going to be a lot more rewarding. And the great majority of us, we do not use our guitars to play in auditoriums that seat 3,000 people. And these days, we're amplifying. We're using microphones and adding just a little bit of amplification, and it really doesn't matter how loud the guitar is. Go for the beauty. Go for the poetry, for the soul of the guitar.
That's what the guitar does best. That's the unique quality that we just talked about earlier.
Right.
Yeah. Get a guitar that does that, and then you can tell stories.
Right.
Yeah.
And then negotiate also playability with sound, because there are some guitars that sound so good, and they're just such a pain to play. Some of these old Ramirez guitars, oh man, after like 2 hours, I'm ready to go take a nap.
Yeah, they can wear you out.
So for me, it's worth putting up with that pain because of what I'm getting out of those old Ramirez guitars. But if the guitar is too painful to play, and if your hands are small, you have no business playing a 664 scale. It's better to go to a traditional guitar and make sure that you're also enjoying playing the instrument and it's not too taxing or wearing you out to the point that you don't want to pick it up.
Right.
Can I ask just a very practical question? How should students and guitar players go about purchasing a guitar? Where do they start? There is so many different options out there. Can you give us some practical advice? How can they ensure they get the right guitar for them, for who they are?
Yeah, well, that's a good question because I was looking at my inventory this morning and we've got about 200 guitars up on the site right now for sale. So it can be overwhelming. Where do you start when the selection is so vast? Probably the most practical thing is if you have a budget, that'll help narrow things down real quick. That'll narrow it down into a selection of guitars, and then from there, we usually like to ask people what kind of sound they like. Meaning, do you have a player that you like, or an album that was recorded that you really like? You're fond of the sound, or something like that, and that gives us a lot of good information because then we can go, I know that sound too. That's a nice sound. We have some guitars that do that. Yeah, sure. And so people have personal preferences for the sort of the sound quality, so we try to identify that as quickly as we can, and then that narrows it down even more. And then, having a guitar is a very personal thing. A guitar in the hands of person A may not work at all, but in person B's hands, it's the guitar of their dreams. So you kind of got to match the guitar. It's a little bit like dating. It's like we're a matchmaking service almost. We're trying to find the right guitar for the right person, and people play differently.
Right.
Some people have a really strong right hand and they really dig in. Some people play very lightly and maybe don't play rest strokes or whatever. Or some people want a guitar that has a very controlled sound so that not a lot of color. They don't want to move around and then all of a sudden the sound's changing on them and they can't control it. But some people do want that because they want to have the option to. So you find out what people are looking for, and then of course the experience is get it in their hands. And get them to play it,
feel it.
So people come in and we'll try guitars, or a lot of times we'll narrow it down to maybe if we're sending guitars out, if a guy is in New York and he can't stop in on his lunch break kind of thing. Well, we might send him 2 or 3 guitars once we've narrowed it down and had the conversation, and then let him take it from there. And on our website we've made great effort to write descriptions that accurately describe the guitar, so that when somebody's trying it out, there's no false. It's what they expected.
You'll be able to pick that out in the way the guitar
The photos also, so you really get a lot of different angles, so you can see what the guitar looks like. Because that's another thing. We also do videos where you not only hear somebody else playing the guitar, which gives you a little bit more information.
Sure.
But it also you can see how it sits on their body, and are they wrestling with it, or does it look easy to play? So we provide all of that on the site as information for people to sort of try to see, that one probably isn't going to work for me, this one more like it. And then from there, we talk them through the process, and then you got to let them try it after that and see if they take to it. And it's not really much of a science, it's more of an art, but luckily we've got good people at GSI. We've got John Paul and Andy, who you know also.
Right.
And they have guided a lot of people into the right guitars, so it's a really fun process, I gotta say.
Yeah. And can I just say this? By the way, there's no kickbacks here or anything like that. But when I think about the Guitar Salon International, they are often imitated but never equaled in the amount of expertise and just the way they want to help people. What I've noticed, even when my students go to play guitars, there's absolutely no sales pressure or anything like that. It's all education. Try guitars. And what I love about what John Paul and Andy Lee, what they do is they listen to people and then they try to match people with the right guitar, because it could be so overwhelming to go into Guitar Salon and have a selection of 200 guitars right there. And then after about the 6 guitars, you're done. You're on overload. But if you trust these guys to basically take down the information and your sound preferences, they'll be able to actually pull out the guitars that are a good match for you, and so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. And so my student last night, he came and he recorded a piece here in my studio. He purchased a Dominic Wirth.
Okay.
Beautiful guitar. He made a beautiful recording. And he said, I really enjoyed the hunt for a guitar, but I'm glad it was cut short because I was getting overwhelmed. And when I found this guitar, I think it was the 3rd guitar that he tried. He said that was it, and I had to stop. and that's just a testament to the skill of John Paul and Andy to match him with the right
To
guitar.
narrow it down from 200 to 3.
Right.
And one of them will be the one that fits.
Yeah, so I would say trust the pros. Don't gamble with guitars. Whenever you gamble and buy guitars off of, Reverb and eBay, know that there's always a gamble. The description may not match what you're getting in your hands. Okay, one more question.
Sure.
Your favorite guitar under $1,000, favorite, maybe most, you could have the most value in a guitar under $5,000. I know that's really hard.
I'd say under 1,000. Well, we just got in these really fun guitars, these colorful guitars. There's these new guitars out by Cordoba called Matisse, and they're only $219. And we just listed them last night. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
They are so much fun. I think I'm probably super excited about those guitars because there was a little promotional ad video that was done of using these people painting and creating, and these guitars all have 4 different colors. And the video is so fun, and you see these people painting, and I kind of think that's what playing guitar should be.
Right.
You're painting with sound.
Right.
And so I think for $219, these are super fun guitars.
Incredible.
Yeah. So I would say those are kind of the newest thing that's hit my radar that's gotten me excited in that price point. Under $5,000, wow. There's some really great stuff. I really like right now what Wolfgang Yellinghaus is doing. He's building, he's got 2 things going. He's got his own guitars that he calls Wolfgang Yellinghaus, and he does a line of guitars with Edmund Bloschinger called La Cañada. And these 2 lines are basically meant to replicate sort of these old guitars in the way they're built, the thicknesses that they're built, the weight that they're built, even the look. They do this antiquing process to kind of make the guitars look old. I think they take cigarette ashes and throw it in the finish and kind of, and they dirty it up and everything to make the guitars. They even sometimes fake like little cracks and things in the tops
varnish,
to kind of give it this sort of worn, antiqued, vintage look or whatever.
And it's really convincing.
Yeah, they look really super fun. And he's done, in his own line, he's doing some Torres models. He's even got a 1912 Segovia Manuel Ramirez model that he does. Interestingly, it's not in the same woods. It's not rosewood. It's maple. But when you play these guitars, they also, maybe it's psychological that you're looking at them and they look old, but they almost have this kind of loose, sort of warm old. They sound like old Spanish guitars in a way. And I think for under $5,000, they're French polished. To me, those 2 lines, those are, since I love these old guitars so much, those are under $5,000. You can kind of get an introduction to this kind of guitar with these 2 lines. So I like those a lot too.
Yeah. For about what? 1% of the price of it?
Something, a very fraction of the price. Yeah, a fraction of the price. You can get close.
All right, we have a few more minutes, and we want to open it up for some question and answer. I'm going to try to monitor these questions and answers. So if you have a question, this is the time to just write it either on our website at eliteguitarist.com or on YouTube. We have a first question here. Is there a guitar that can be both classical and flamenco? And if so, who is the maker?
Oh, yeah. Pepe Romero is a good friend of ours, of course, and his knowledge about guitars is overwhelming, and he's famous for playing Miguel Rodriguez guitars. And he tells me these stories about how Miguel Rodriguez himself didn't distinguish between flamenco and classical guitars. He just made guitars that were different colors. He made yellow guitars and brown guitars, and he would mix different woods. And it was usually the players that would come in and say, well, I'm a flamenco player, and I'm looking for a flamenco guitar. And he would just build guitars. He didn't build flamenco or classical guitars. He made no distinction. He built them the same.
Right.
What would end up being played by flamenco players and what would end up being played by classical players were the same build to Rodriguez. And so I think you can play a lot of guitars, in fact, most guitars, surprisingly, can do both. It's more the setup. So flamenco players like to have lower action, which creates a little bit of there's a buzziness that is part of the flamenco sound, a little bit like when you hit a snare drum and you hear the snare rattling underneath a little bit. There's a little bit of that sound, because flamenco is a very percussive.
Right, a little raspy. You get some fret.
Right,
noise
and so a little
too.
bit of that rattle is, you get that by lowering the action. Classical players tend to avoid that. Also, when you have the lower action and you get a little bit of rattle, it kind of tends to kill the sustain a little bit quicker. And in flamenco, that's perfect. They don't care about sustain.
Right.
They care all about, like a machine gun, rapid fire, whether it's rasgueados or picados or whatever. There's a lot of, but classical players like to have the strings a little bit higher, so you clear the frets. You're not buzzing, and you get more sustain because there's a lot more lyricism and kind of. There is in flamenco too. I'm generalizing here.
Sure.
But a lot of guitars can be converted. But there are some guitars that I would say are pretty much either classical or flamenco. There are makers who nuance the guitars so hard in one way or the other that they can't do both. I think of Daniel Friedrich. That's you can't play flamenco on that.
Right.
Persuasively, at least not yet. That is a classical guitar.
Right.
Or maybe even a lot of Ramirez 1As. That would be tough to play flamenco persuasively on. I mean, you can do it, but it's not going to be convincing. And then similarly, there are some flamenco guitars, Arcángel Fernandez, Marcelo Barbero. There's a whole tradition of this kind of mid-century style, lightweight flamenco guitar that it's not going to really. If you try to play classical on it, you're going to struggle a little bit to get it to do the kinds of things classical players are trying to get. But for the large part, there are many, many guitars in the middle, a vast number that you adjust the action, put a tap light on it, and it's a flamenco.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We have a few more guitar-related questions. One of them is regarding Cordoba C10. What do I think about that? Well, I've owned a Cordoba C10 and a C9, C12. My favorite guitar in the Cordoba line is actually a C7.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
Which is like a $500 guitar.
Yeah.
I have one right there on the wall, and it is just an incredible value for the money. I'm thinking if I lost all my guitars, I mean, I don't want to lose my guitars, but I don't think my career would suffer that much if I just had a C7. It's amazingly well built, and a lot of my students are getting them just to have as a travel guitar if they go on vacation. My favorite is a C7 as opposed to a C12. The C12 is a more modern guitar, raised fingerboard and so on. Another question is how to purchase a guitar from GSI if you are not local.
Get on the phone with John Paul or Andy, and they'll talk you down from the selection of 200 guitars down to 1 or 2 or 3 probably that are going to be very likely candidates. And then from there, we ship guitars overnight with UPS. This is one of the great things about living in the modern world is you can be on the other side of the country, and you can be on the phone with us 4:30 p.m. our time, and you can have a guitar on your doorstep the next morning, your time, and you can be 3 time zones away. So we ship guitars actually all over the world, but for overnight in the United States, people can try guitar, and it's not very expensive. I think it's between $150 and $200 to ship a guitar overnight with insurance. This wasn't possible 100 years ago with horse-drawn carriages, and all this kind of thing. We live in a time now where you can try guitars out very easily. And so the majority of the guitars that we sell, actually, we send out to people. Very few people actually come in. In fact, some of our local customers in the Los Angeles area prefer for us to even use Uber or something to send them a guitar because they don't like coming in. Because then they're in this strange acoustic environment. They don't have all their guitars there to compare them against. So a lot of times people prefer to try out the guitar for several days in their home. And that way you can show it to your teacher or play it for your friends or do whatever and get lots of opinions. And you're not just in a store for an hour with very limited, you can really try it. So people really like to try them at home. Real easy to ship them out. So.
And you guys do that. Somebody calls, you send one. Try it.
Yep, that's it. And we have a.
Will you send Torres for a trial? I'm joking. Of
some
course
guitars
not.
like that, it's better to probably hand carry them. Yeah. No, we've shipped some expensive guitars in the past, but a Torres would be a little bit. I'd be a little nervous about doing that. Yeah.
If you want to buy a Torres, just buy a plane ticket.
UPS and UPS do offer this service. They call it high value shipments. And if you take a certain amount of insurance out, I think it's $5,000, which costs you maybe another $35 or $40 to do. Then it gets a different treatment. The boxes, the relay points, it's all done by hand, so there's no conveyor belts or anything like that. Whenever we've used that service, in the history of GSI, we've never had a guitar get damaged. So if I were to ship something like a Torres out, I would do so using that service.
Right. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Just a few comments here
Sure.
during the chat. John Paul helped me select a wonderful guitar.
Uh-huh.
Good job, guys.
Uh-huh.
My budget is $3,000 to $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough for a good guitar?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. 20 years ago, it was hard to find a guitar. I mean, the guy that founded GSI, Tim McClouchy, told me that when he was a kid growing up, his parents bought him a cheap guitar. It was made in Japan. And by cheap, I meant at that time it was like $1,000 in the 60s. But it was a plywood guitar, and it was not a very good guitar. But you just didn't have a lot of options then. But in the world we're in today, thanks largely to Tim having that experience, he's been on this quest. He also owns Cordoba guitars. And that has been the mission of the Cordoba guitar line, has been to develop a low-priced guitar that is playable. You don't want to have these stiff, hard-to-play guitars, especially if you're a student, because then you're never going to want to practice.
Right.
You want to have the kind of guitar that you can't put down.
Right.
That dinner time, honey. Sorry, I'm practicing scales.
Right,
you know, you want a guitar that makes you do that. And there are many guitars in the, like we were just talking about. I even mentioned the La Cañadas and the Yelling Houses. If you like the vintage stuff, there's a lot of variety. But I think Cordoba also offers a large selection, as you know.
Right.
And they're very affordable, high quality guitars, very easy to play, well built, great sound. Like you said, you could play a recital on this, right?
Sure.
You could dazzle an audience with it, and it's a $500 guitar.
Way too generous about the dazzling part, but yeah, you could get guitars for $500. They sound great, or you could get some of those Master Series.
Yep.
And those are handcrafted in the U.S. I mean, for under $4,000, and I've played a lot of those. I've demoed them for Cordoba, and they're really consistent.
Yeah.
And those guys take a lot of care.
There's a new one out right now. They have a Friedrich model. I don't know if you played that one yet.
I have.
Oh,
it's amazing.
Those are spectacular. You're sitting there thinking, this is only like $3,000 or $4,000.
It's less.
Unbelievable.
It's under $3,000. So check out Cordoba Friedrich model and the Esteso too.
Ours are a little more expensive because they're French polished.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. No false advertisement here.
Yeah.
Guys, the GSI has been a tremendous ally to the Elite Guitarist platform. I recommend them highly. Also, if you have an active subscription with our website, with our platform, just go ahead and mention that when you get ready to purchase a guitar, and there is a VIP discount there for you. Don't forget to enter your information on the eliteguitarist.com website below the live stream icons there, and we're gonna give away 5 of these guitar care packages, strings, CDs, a nail file, and I also want to let's see here. I want to remind you that there is an additional live stream scheduled for this Friday. That's in 2 days from now at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we're going to have Larry Kuntz and John Story come and talk about the art of the jazz guitar. They're going to be here together. They're going to jam. They're going to play. Whether you're a jazz guitarist or a classical or flamenco guitarist, I think there is a lot for you to learn in this process. So tune back in on the Elite Guitarist platform on Friday at 10 a.m. I want to say thanks to David for coming. Yeah, how fun was this?
Talking about guitars there's nothing more enjoyable, right? I mean, to be able to sit here and talk to you about it, it was a total thrill to be here.
Right. Yeah. And the fun was worth the liability cost for me of having close to $1 million guitars on that $12 guitar stand.
Yeah.
So everybody press on, keep on playing, have fun with the guitar. I realize that there are some of you in some parts of the world where your income is $100 a month, and I know how that is because I grew up in Romania, in communist Romania, and my dad was making $80 a month, in income. And so to talk about high value guitars like this, it could come across as insensitive, and that's really not our intention. We want to be sensitive to everybody's condition. And I'll say this: whatever you are able to get it and love it and enjoy it. I got my first classical guitar when I was 18 years old. I actually had a tour here in the States, and I had to borrow a guitar. And during the tour, one of the tuning machines broke off, so I had to use like a set of pliers to tune it right before the concert, right? And then somebody in Montana saw that I didn't have my own guitar, and he said, I have this old Yamaha guitar. It's just been sitting in my closet. Would you like to have it? And I was besides myself because I had my own guitar, like a $200 guitar. But it was mine and it was special. So do the best you can with what you've got. Press on, enjoy music, and really ultimately think about the guitar as being, a means to an end. Is not, don't get that obsession about acquiring more guitars and more and more. Don't do that. Just make sure that you practice in the process and don't get wrapped up in the gear and the strings. And after a while, guitars are guitars, strings are strings. They sound like strings, just make music. Press on. I'll see you next time. See you on Friday. David, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
All right.
Cheers, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.